David Brewster here again with another 3-for-all, and this is 3 Lydian arpeggios. And by Lydian arpeggios, I'm basically talking about sharp 11 arpeggios, or raised fourth arpeggios. You can think of it either way. Because in music, the fourth is also known as the 11th. It just depends on where you're putting that note and the other notes that are possibly combined with it, whether it's part of a chord, part of an arpeggio, or even just a little fragment or piece of a scale too. So Lydian is the fourth mode of the major scale, and it has a raised fourth or sharp 4, which is also known as the sharp 11. The easiest way to wrap the sound of this, tonality, whether you're thinking of the scale, you're thinking of an arpeggio or a chord, the best way I found to really kind of hone in and zero in on what it sounds like is, let's just take a basic, like E major cowboy chord, right? Think of Johnny Cash, right? We'll take the third, which is the G sharp, and we're going to basically flip that to an A sharp. So you can kind of see we're taking this fingering and kind of flipping it around upside down in a way. So now we have an A sharp on the G string instead of a G sharp. And by doing that, you're going to create this dreamy, kind of Steve Vai sounding chord. Now, when I think of Lydian in my mind, the first person I think of is Steve Vai. Definitely, Steve Vai kind of picked up his Lydian, traits and behavior from Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa definitely was a big admirer of Lydian. And there's lots of other guitarists out there too, John Petrucci and a bunch of people that tap into this sound. But for whatever reason, like in my mind, I think of certain things and I associate it with certain people, the 7 sharp 9 chord, that's the Hendrix chord, the natural minor scale, I tend to think of people like Randy Rhoads or Kirk Hammett. When I think Lydian, I think of Steve Vai, so I kind of associate certain things with certain people. And then when I think of it that way, I can instantly think of what that sounds like. And to me, that just sounds like the beginning of either a Dream Theater or Steve Vai song. Just the way it sounds, right? Now you can find that chord all over the fretboard. There's some other ways you can play that sound, or kind of bring out that tonality. But the important thing there is you have an A sharp in some sort of E major chord. So if that's the chord, tonality that we're searching for, then the spelling of this arpeggio is going to create that sound too. So we're going to have the root, the third, the raised fourth, the fifth, and the seventh. So that's going to give you E, G sharp, A sharp, B, D sharp, and then the root again. Now for those of you listening to that and maybe you're thinking of someone like Marty Friedman or Jason Becker, then your ear is definitely in the right place, because if we change the root to G sharp instead of E, if we change the root to G sharp, that's going to have almost more of a G sharp hirajoshi sound or tonality. And that's a Japanese scale. But we're really kind of thinking this more or less in the key of E and not G sharp, minor. The first lick here, or the first arpeggio, sharp 11 arpeggio, or Lydian arpeggio, however you want to think of this. But the first idea, we're really just going to grab the notes of the arpeggio, the root, the third, the sharp 4, the fifth, and the seventh. Like that, just a really cool shape. And there you can see we have the E, the G sharp, the A sharp, the B. And we're basically hiking over to the B string and grabbing F sharp, and then grabbing A sharp again. So right there, we're kind of, hitting the strongest notes to bring out the sound of that sharp 11 or, raised fourth tonality. Because right there we're playing it twice, right? The third note and the final note are both A sharp. So we're really driving that sound home there. Now the cool thing about that pattern is we can also borrow that same fingering shape and then basically jump over the D string, grab the D sharp and E on the G, and then grab a B and a D sharp on the high E. So it's the same fingering that we just uncovered, but now we're basically flirting with E major 7 if we do it this way. Which also sounds pretty cool. Same fingering, just different strings and different notes, obviously. And there is a pretty cool lick that we can uncover if we combine those two shapes together and kind of weave between them. Something like this. And basically all I'm doing there is skipping through the first shape. And then when I get to that B and A sharp right there, I turn it around and then I grab the major 7 shape that we uncovered there. And then we're going back to that Lydian sharp 11 shape that I introduced at the beginning. So we're kind of, starting with the first shape, weaving into the second one, and then going back to the first shape again. So slowly it's like this. The next lick is really just taking what we started with there, and I'm just moving up a little further on the fretboard and then locating the necessary notes to outline, sharp 11 or this Lydian tonality that we're flirting with. So instead of this, now I'm starting on that G sharp. And I found this cool little shape that lives right there. So we're not starting on the root, we're actually starting on the major third, that G sharp. But it has a really interesting sound, especially if you play it, if you're playing that against a chord. Really interesting little phrase. Shape, I guess I should say. There's this kind of weaving melodic pattern that we can create using that shape. And there I'm obviously just kind of moving through that sequence, I'm moving through that arpeggio using a sequence, and I'm just kind of sidestepping through the notes. And I actually ended it there with a harmonic, which is kind of cool. And once again, that would sound really cool against the appropriate chord, that sharp 11 sound. The last lick here, I'm actually borrowing a shape that I uncovered just playing around with the Lydian scale. So if you think of the root note E right here, and we're moving up just a little further on the fretboard, so we're slowly creeping our way up the neck. But the root here, E, on the D string, and then you're basically just playing this whole step pattern. Which that would be E Lydian right there. But if you really look at the scale shape that we just played, there's a little arpeggio fingering that you can uncover where we're just playing, kind of a partial scale or a partial arpeggio. We can do it like this. Using that shape I just uncovered. And I just made a little melodic sequence or phrase out of the notes. And there you can see I'm kind of moving through that arpeggio fingering. And right there you can see I'm moving through that shape. But I'm using a little melodic kind of sequence, right? So there we kind of walked up, and then I went up a little higher, and then came down, and then I ended it with those two bends. I really like the sound of that lick because we're bending the first bend up to the sharp 4, that A sharp. And then we're bending D sharp up a half step to E after that, which is the root, right? So it's a very interesting sound, and we're flirting with two of the strongest notes right there, the sharp 4 and the major 7. So creating this very tense sound, but it's really cool. All right, well, that's going to wrap up this, look at 3 Lydian arpeggios, or sharp 11 arpeggios. And if you like this sound, obviously you can check out guys like Steve Vai and John Petrucci, who I mentioned earlier. But then check out, some fusion and jazz players, people like Frank Gambale or Pat Metheny or someone like that. And you can definitely hear, other guitarists and other styles of music using these sounds too. Give some of these licks and ideas, a few laps and repeats, and let me know what happens. Leave some comments and feedback. And please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back with some more lessons before you know it. Thank you.